A very warm welcome to another Action for Happiness event. My name is Mark Williamson. Delighted to see so many of you already joining us this evening. Well, it's evening here in the UK, but I know, as always, you're joining from all around the world. Lovely to see you already welcome each other on the chat and to have thousands of people together, as always, in this lovely supportive community. And I'm particularly delighted to welcome Sian Williams here this evening. Sian, lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too, Mark, and hello everybody. I'm slightly overwhelmed because I can see everybody coming in on the chat from all over the world, and it's welcome. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you. And of course, the last time we did an event together was actually almost exactly a decade ago, when you so wonderfully hosted the launch event in London for Action for Happiness. So thank you again for all you did to help us get started all those years ago, and how the world has changed since then in so many ways. It feels like a lot has happened in the world of well-being and resilience and happiness since, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think when we did that event together, I'm a journalist, and there was a lot of skepticism from fellow journalists. And I remember there being some headlines afterwards saying, is there anything more to this than just hello sky, hello clouds, and talking about it being touchy-feely? And this is 10 years ago, and there was a great deal of cynicism, I think, actually, about the whole concept of happiness and whether we can achieve it in some form or another in our life. And there was a mindfulness, a brief mindfulness meditation. I don't know whether you remember it, Mark, by Andy Puddicombe, who of course came up with the magnificent Headspace app. And he did it, and I could see all my colleagues sitting in the front row with their arms folded saying, I'm not going to do this. No, you're not going to get me to shut my eyes and do mindfulness. What do you think I am? And yet here we are, 10 years later, and look at the community that you've got with Action for Happiness, this fantastic, caring, supportive community. And now, of course, well-being, resilience on everybody's lips. I mean, it's the most, there are 215 million results if you type in resilience into Google. So I think the world has changed. I think people realize how much we need that support.
Indeed. Well, thank you. And it's lovely to have you with this theme, resilience and recovery, this evening. And just for the benefit of anyone joining for the first time to one of these events, Sian and I will have a conversation about her great journey, but also great work she's been doing on this theme of resilience and recovery, and particularly in dealing with trauma. And we're going to be exploring what that means, but particularly how we can put it into practice. And I'm delighted that Sian's going to take us through a couple of really helpful exercises as part of the conversation this evening. And as always, we're going to leave time for Q&A. So please do use that function and submit a question, or indeed vote on somebody else's question if you like what they've asked. And we'll get to some of those, probably not all, just after 1:30. And let's dive straight in. I mean, Sian, obviously, you don't really need any introduction to anyone who's watched television in the UK, any time in the last couple of decades. But as well as when we first met, being a fantastic and much loved TV presenter and host and newsreader and so on. You've obviously then been on quite a personal journey that's led to your now expertise in this area. Perhaps you could fill us in a bit on what happened there.
So I've been a journalist for 35 years now in daily news on British telly, and I trained as a trauma assessor primarily to help me and my colleagues recover from difficult and challenging news events that we were working on. I could see around me that there was not a lot of coping going on, a lot of I can get through this, going out into the next job the following day, not really processing what's going on when you see some difficult stuff. And I did that trauma assessing, and then I sort of crashed headlong into my own personal trauma, thinking I was going to be able to deal with it, and didn't manage it very effectively. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and very suddenly had to have a double mastectomy. And I had this sort of arrogance of thinking I was very healthy and cancer wouldn't happen to me. I ate salmon and drank green tea, and I was a runner, and it was my husband that ate sweets and drank double cream all day, and there was a sense of why have I got cancer? I don't understand. I'm doing all the right stuff, and of course, as you're told by oncologists, anyway, I'm sure there are people here who've experienced cancer. It's a combination of genetics and bad luck, and I was extremely lucky in that my cancer was treated very quickly. I had fairly extensive surgery, but that was it. And I felt very, very grateful. And I thought that I was doing okay physically, but emotionally, I was really struggling. And I think that when it really hit home was when I went to a doctor's surgery, when I needed to have my dressings changed. And I hadn't told anyone I had cancer. I hadn't told my colleagues. I hadn't told my friends. I didn't want, I don't much like the language of cancer. The braveness and the surviving and the battling and all the sort of fighting metaphors that come with cancer, I was really struggling with, because I didn't feel brave and I didn't feel I was battling. And my mum had lost her battle with cancer, and it's an unfair war. So there was a lot that was going on in my head, and I was in this doctor's surgery about to get my dressings changed, and I had 4 drain bottles, which I tucked into a very long coat, like a Doctor Who type coat, this big, enormous overcoat, because I didn't want anyone to see or to know. And when I was in the waiting room, I saw a magazine on the waiting room table, and my colleague, my newsreading colleague, I'm a newsreader, my newsreading colleague was on the front cover, and it said, the headline was, "How does she manage to stay so glamorous and still have such a busy life?" And I looked at her and I looked at me, and I just have this wash of everything, sort of self-pity and self-criticism, and why aren't you getting better faster, and will you ever get back to where you were, and all this stuff. And I thought, I just need to know how to process this. I need to know how to deal with it. And the trauma work I'd done so far, and actually a master's in psychology as well, wasn't really allowing me to work out my own brain. So I went on a process of discovery, so talking to a lot of experts about what can help us all get through difficult and challenging events, whatever that event is. And so lots of people I spoke to, they had very different traumas: the loss of a child, the loss of parents in Auschwitz, just the loss of a leg, just lots and lots of different experiences. But there were commonalities in their trauma recovery, which was, firstly, that it doesn't go like that. Trauma doesn't stop. You don't start here feeling rubbish and get to here feeling much better. Trauma is back and forth and wibbly wobbly, and you stumble and you fall and you scrape your knees, and it can feel really quite difficult. But also that actually there were common themes that we all shared in getting better. So reaching for the outstretched hands, knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to talk to somebody. There's a very good phrase that a psychologist called George Bonono uses, who did a lot of work on 9/11 and resilience after 9/11. And he worked out that the majority of people were very resilient after this just disastrous, horrific event. And he called it coping ugly. And I think that's a really good phrase, which is, you cope, and it doesn't look pretty, but we try to grow, and we try to thrive, and we try to find what we can in order for us to do it. So I started on that path, and then I started a doctorate in counselling psychology. I wrote a book, and just always trying to learn from other people and experts on what might work.
Ron, it's really moving actually to hear you sharing that. I'm very grateful to you for being so open and showing that kind of vulnerability that I think really helps connect with other people. And I can already see on the chat lots of people sharing their own sort of resonating with what you're saying. I'd love to move on to some of the things that you found helpful in your own, because I know you've got lots to share there, but I just wanted to stop and, I mean, you talked about this, there's almost like a sort of a stigma, or there's a challenge about how we feel about accepting the traumatic things we face. Am I right in reflecting on the fact that almost step one is just to kind of, be able to accept how things are, even if they're really, really awful, and just to be kind of at peace with? Is that important?
Incredibly important. I wouldn't say it's easy, because it's not. Because self-acceptance needs self-compassion. And a lot of us, I'm sure, have quite a well-developed self-critical voice, which is quite loud. And it can feel like it's the loudest voice in your head. You're not moving fast enough. You're not getting better faster. Look at other people around you, how well they're doing. You know, I remember hearing the cancer experience of other people and reading in a magazine while I was still in hospital, so and so and so and so is running a marathon for you know, X months after she's had what I had. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm failing at it. I can't do it. And I think the heart of recovery is accepting where you are and bringing a self-compassion to where you are, and you bringing that kind voice, you know, being your own best friend. I know that sounds a bit corny, but that is the only way to do it. And say, I need to acknowledge what's going on in my body, notice what's going on in my, you know, my behaviors, my emotions, my thoughts, what's coming up for me, where is it coming up for me, where is the discomfort there, notice it, acknowledge it, accept it. And that acceptance is the first step towards growth, I believe.
And I feel that, thank you for sharing that. And I feel that this skill of mindfulness, you know, this thing that Andy Podicum was trying to teach at our launch event, so, you know, mainstream in many ways, it's still often misunderstood. And it's almost you can only do what you've just described to sort of begin to hold things as they are and move on if you've got that awareness of how things are. And so that skill of what we pay attention to is really important. And in fact, I wonder if this might be a nice time to introduce an exercise that I know you'd mentioned had been helpful to you, that just involves us using our attention and looking and using our senses and looking around us. How would you do that and introduce us to it?
Well, I think what happens is that we either can get dragged into the past and what we should have. There can be a lot of shoulds, I think, for a lot of us. I should have done this. I should do that. And that takes us back. Or we can fear about the future and the what ifs. And really, I think going back to that, acknowledging, accepting, noticing, being with, even if it's uncomfortable, and I'm not doubting that it'll be uncomfortable, but being with and softening into it means that you need to be present and you need to feel really rooted in the here and now. And one technique that I know works with children, but also works quite well with adults, grown-ups too, is the 5-4-3-2-1 method. Now, I'm sure a lot of people watching this tonight will be very aware of it, but just to get you back into where you are so that you can take that first breath, that first move towards acceptance and acknowledging, which can feel quite intimidating, you need a grounding technique. And 5-4-3-2-1 is 5 things you can see. So maybe we can do this just for a moment. It'll only take a moment.
We'll turn the chat off for a second and let's actually
okay. Okay. So 5-4-3-2-1 is 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That's the simplest version of it. So, for example, it would be look around for 5 things you can see at the moment. So I can see the computer, I can see a desk. Just say them internally, 5 things you can see. And when you've noticed that, 4 things you can feel, and that's paying attention to your body. It might be, I can feel myself connected to the chair. I can feel my hair on my neck. I can feel the shirt on my body. I can feel the warmth in the room. Just listen and pay attention to the noises around you. Very often we don't pay attention to the sounds. And that could be a rumble of traffic outside. Might be my voice. Might be the sound of your tummy rumbling because it's almost supper time or breakfast for some. 2 things you can smell. This is often quite difficult for people, actually. But if you can't smell anything currently, name your 2 favorite smells. So some people perhaps will bring geranium to mind or lavender, really soothing scents that can bring them right back into the present, bring them into a more soothing place. And then taste. My taste is chocolate. Your taste might be something else. And if you can't taste anything, some people just say one full breath. One breath that is 4 counts in, and hold for 2, and then out for 5. So a slightly longer out breath. And that should bring you into where you are, into this place, into the here and now, not into what you've got to do after this event, or what you've done in the run up to it, or what you've yet to do, but just where we are. And I think where we are is the most important place to be, just in this moment, acknowledging each other and learning from each other. Yeah.
Thank you, Sian. I really found that beneficial, even though I've done a similar exercise many times before. And I guess I wonder, given what you've shared about your own journey, it feels to me that sometimes the hardest time to do those things is when we feel in the darkest place and under most pressure. Do you find a way of being able to use some of these techniques when you were at your lowest ebb or feeling most hopeless?
I did use, actually I used Andy Puddicombe's Headspace app in my darkest moments, because sometimes I needed a voice to hear, to connect to, and just to get back into the, don't be looking around you at where you think you should be and you're not. Notice the self-critical voice, because it's not going to go away for me. I'm 56 now. If I haven't got rid of it now, it's going to be with me for life. And sometimes I think acknowledging that self-critical voice, you know, there is a bit of, if you think of the brain as 3 systems, I particularly like the work of Paul Gilbert, who does a lot in compassion, which is my research at the moment, is in compassion. And he sort of thinks of the brain as having 3 systems: a threat system, which of course I think a lot of us have been in for the past year, which is the brain on high alert, looking out for danger, hypervigilant. So not just our brain, but also our body, you know, because actually what comes first is our body that reacts to threat before our thoughts start going. So the brain in high threat means there's a bit of your brain, the amygdalae, which are really deep in the center of the brain, which are fantastic at keeping an eye out, basically. And it's an old primitive brain. The thing is, if it's on all the time, it's very hard to switch away from. But if we think of that as one system, threat system, the drive system, which is motivation, getting to where we want to go to, goal setting, that kind of thing. And then the soothe system. Now, if you think of those as 3 circles, threat, drive, and soothe, they should all be in balance. And perhaps ask yourself, how balanced are they today or this week? Is my threat a bit bigger than my soothe? Where has my rest and digest been? Have I just been in very high active alert state for so long that I'm finding it difficult to switch off? So I think it's about that, noticing when things are out of balance. And when things are out of balance, very often our brain takes us, again, thank you brain, our brain takes us to effective coping strategies. So when we were on the savannah and something was coming towards us and we didn't think we could kill it and we needed to run away, you know, it would be fight, flight, freeze, or submit. That's the other one. But fight, flight, freeze, submit. But if that's on all the time, then obviously we're ready to fight, we're ready to flight, we're ready to freeze, we're ready to stop. And I think it's about the coping strategies that come from that are very often avoidance, distraction, self-critic, the things that work in the short term, but not in the long term. And I think it's about recognizing our behaviors as well. When I'm in threat, what do? When I'm in threat, I overwork. And when I overwork, I get sick. That's my threat. My protective mechanism is saying, well, you better work harder. you know, it's threat state, there's danger around the corner, it could happen any moment, right? You've got to get out there, you've got to do more, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And then I just get to exhaustion and then I collapse. So it's about recognizing, right, that's threat and drive, but where is the soothe here? And if those three aren't in balance, you are not in balance.
That's really helpful, actually, to be reminded of Paul's wonderful work and those systems. I'd actually love us to come back to the point about compassion you made there, because it's so important, and I know it's very a lot. Before we leave your sort of recovery journey, if that's the right phrase to use, and move on to perhaps wider issues that lots of us are facing at the moment. I know you had a model that you mentioned to me. I think it was Thrive was the word, the acronym you used, of techniques and tips, if you like, that you found or others have found helpful in that sort of recovery journey. And I just found it really a useful summary. Do you want to maybe walk us through some of the things that you in that phase?
Okay. So I call it Thrive because we love an acronym, don't we, really? But the reason I guess it worked for me was when I was doing the research for the book, but also I did some research for the MSc, for the Masters, that I published in the wonderfully named European Journal of Psychotraumatology. I'm sure all of you will be rushing to see my peer-reviewed article on that, but which is about post-traumatic growth. It's about how to grow after trauma. And what I noticed were these commonalities in people coming out of adversity. So the T is talk and connect. So reflecting rather than ruminating. You know, when I was talking about the brain in threat state, we can often be ruminating, going round and round and round and asking ourselves unanswerable questions. And that's because, again, the brain is in that old primitive way of thinking, rather than the kind of new brain using the prefrontal cortex. Am I in a threat state? What can I do about this now? And actually getting it out, talking to somebody, reflecting on it. Even if you're in a period of uncertainty and you're reflecting on the difficulties that come from that was with my participants and my cohort were journalists who had experienced PTSD and trauma. That was the major thing that they found worked for them, was sharing their experiences with somebody else. It's not always somebody who is in your house or somebody who you are very close to. You know, I say, talk to someone you love, but if you can't find someone you love, talk to someone you don't, because sometimes other people, you don't want to worry other people. And I think sometimes that keeps us from sharing. But people want to know how to help. So it's wonderful to share experiences. Notice where you are, step away, breathe, reach out for help, talk. The H is help, and the H is really important, because I don't just mean accepting the help, I mean offering the help as well, and showing it to yourself. There is a strength in vulnerability. I noticed so I used to do a lot of disaster reporting, and I noticed when I was in Pakistan that after the earthquake there in Kashmir, they had nothing, absolutely nothing, and yet when the first food, and I'm just thinking about it now, and every time I think about it, I get slightly when people get together and share what little they have and show compassion to one another, it is just an extraordinary thing, an absolutely extraordinary thing. And I think they were willing to accept compassion and show compassion, and also give it to themselves. And it's that old Kristen Neff thing, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to look after yourself in order to look after other people, or the oxygen mask. So that's the H. The R for me is rest, which stimulates the parasympathetic system, which is a very different system to the one that we're working on if we're sort of go, 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 go. A lot of that is about sleep. I know we've got some sleep experts in the audience today, because we've got Dr. Sophie Bostock, who said she was joining us tonight, who's a sleep scientist. There is a whole science around sleep, obviously. But the cortisol awakening response, how you wake first thing in the morning, is as important as how you go to bed. We're always told about don't look at your mobiles, don't look at your computers, etc., etc. However, how you wake in the morning is equally as important. So your cortisol response, which is your stress response, if you wake to noise in the dark, you can have a high flat cortisol response that lasts throughout the day. And I did an experiment at Westminster University where I woke up with an eye mask on to the noise of an alarm. And later on in the day at 4 o'clock, I did a battery of cognitive tests and I was hopeless. And I did another test where I woke to early morning light, which was one of those wake up clocks, you know, with a gradual light that turns on. And that does affect the cortisol response in your brain. My cortisol was more variable. And when I did the test at 4 o'clock, I performed much better. So it's extraordinary, I think, how sleep is the best cognitive enhancer we know. So it's the best protective mechanism that we know of. How we wake is really important as well. If you can, wake to naturally occurring morning light or an artificial one like this one. that works quite well as well. So rest, gosh, I haven't got through Thrive quickly, have I? I'll whip through the others. I is insight. Notice your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors. Where are your emotions? Direct your attention towards what's going on in your body. How am I behaving differently? What might this be attached to? V, values, prioritize, work out what matters. We've all had a chance to reflect, I think, to pause, perhaps to cherish, to nurture, to experience nature. What values are you holding on to from this ghastly time for a lot of people? Have there been pockets of something that you've thought, actually, that I want to take with me, that I can lose, but those things I can take with me? What do you value? And then exercise uses up adrenaline, produces a protein called BDNF, which encourages neuronal development in the brain. Exercise is fabulous, even if you can't do very much. And I think when you're recovering from something difficult, it is hard to do anything. Don't beat yourself up about that. Do what you can and eat. Hippocrates said 2,000 years ago, all disease starts in the gut. There is a reason that the stomach is called the second brain. You know, it produces vast amounts of serotonin, dopamine, all this good stuff. And we need to nurture it and look after it. So that's my Thrive. So talk, help, rest, insight, values, and exercise and eat. So I've cheated a bit with the E because I've snuck 2 in.
We'll put that in the follow-up email that everyone will get tomorrow. And anyone who's asking about anything more to do with the event, we will also share, as always, the video and the chat if you'd like to follow up on anything else or share with others. I'm glad you mentioned exercise at the end there. And I guess one other thing there just to note is, of course, exercise often brings us out into nature as well, which we also know is important. And this week, as many will know, is Mental Health Awareness Week, at least here in the UK. And the theme is nature. And I feel that one of the best forms of exercise isn't the joining the gym and going crazy. It's more the get out, have a walk, get some nature time.
Yeah, I think that's it. But also, again, that pay attention to and acknowledge, because often when I go for a walk, I don't know about anyone else, but I'll do it with these in. I'll do it with these headphones in, and I'll be listening to something, catching up on something, listening to the news, finding out. And actually, when you take them out and you go back to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 when you're doing it. So you're looking around for the 5 things you can see, you're feeling, you're listening, you're smelling, you know, all those things. And again, that roots you in the present, and it is so calming. If you can just do that for 5 minutes, then it's an incredible gift that you're showing to yourself, and that is about self-compassion. And self-compassion is vital.
Well, let's come back to compassion, because you mentioned that before, and you mentioned the work of Paul Gilbert, and it struck me when you talked about that fight or flight response that actually collectively as a society in this crazy COVID time, we've been in a sort of fight or flight response to a very real threat, but you know, a sort of exacerbated sense of fear and uncertainty and so on. And I know, of course, I mean, great credit to you, but you've taken on further on this journey and developed your own skills now as a trauma therapist, and you've been working, I believe, with people on the NHS, you know, helping them deal with traumatic situations recently. I just wanted to ask your reflections on what you're feeling about this period, but also particularly what you've seen in terms of what people are going through at the moment and what we can learn from it.
So for the past 3 years, I've been a psychological therapist, and so I've worked with families in complex trauma. children with ADHD and autism, students. I'm an associate at King's College in London, so a lot of work with adolescents, and also for the past year I've worked in the NHS with patients with acute cancer. So these are a lot of people who will be facing death. So and that's been particularly difficult, obviously, in the pandemic, because they can't get the appointments that they needed, or they're particularly fearful about going into hospital. So they've got the dual threat of the cancer and the pandemic, triple threat, and the people around them and how worried other people are about them. So my main work this year actually has been with the cancer patients in the NHS, and students as well at King's. And I think what I've noticed, wherever anyone is an anxiety, not just about being in lockdown and the pandemic and what it prevents us doing, and perhaps the threat of going outside, but a slight anxiety, maybe even not even slight with some people, about things opening up, about going back out there again, about, this is the thing about resilience. I hear resilience, and a lot of people say it's about bouncing back, and I don't think it is about bouncing back. I think it's about springing forward with our new knowledge learnt during something really tough. That's what resilience means to me. And that, I guess, is what me and my patients and clients have been working through together. And I think it's been a real privilege to be alongside people as they are discovering things about themselves that can better protect them and nourish them and nurture them. A lot of the work has been on recognizing nourishing and depleting things. So what currently in your life depletes you? What takes your energy? And what do you feel gives you that energy to move forward, to spring forward?
I'd love to hear your answers to that question, Sian, if you wouldn't mind. What is it right now that is nourishing or depleting you? I'm just thinking about it for myself as well. What would that be for you, just to bring it to life?
I think going back to what you were saying, Mark, earlier about nature, that nourishes me. Getting out nourishes me. Exercise nourishes me. I used to be a runner, and I used to run marathons and half marathons, and I used to beat myself up quite considerably about the fact that because of this extensive surgery I had, I could no longer run, or at least run the way I wanted to. I couldn't run as far, couldn't run as fast. So it was finding a new activity. It was finding something that, we got a dog. I haven't always been frightened of dogs. we got a puppy, and that has been a joy. And I think it's about finding the little, somebody explained it to me as the little pockets of happiness. Just find the little pockets of happiness where you can. One of my clients gave me a gratitude diary, and because a lot of the work we'd been doing was gratitude. And you know that 3 simple things, just note 3 simple things. And I use it with the kids as well. Just what 3 simple things happened today that you're grateful for, or that you enjoyed. And that has been quite beneficial, I think, to all of us as well. So I would say they're quite small things, Mark. I wouldn't say it's sort of one overwhelming and ta-da, here I am, or here we all are, and we're all sorted.
I think that's the most important message here, which is it's not the one big, huge 20% change. It's the 20 tiny 1% shift. And
absolutely.
That's the factor for happiness with our daily actions and monthly themes, and this idea that little actions over time can add up to something really substantial. Let's come back to this point about the sort of trauma we're facing right now. I loved your description of the sort of threat system and the soothe system. And I know you've been doing some work on compassion and trying to encouraging a bit more of that sense of soothing. Is there perhaps another exercise you could teach us right now to help us do a bit more of that?
I could do something that I've been doing with some of my cancer patients who obviously are holding a lot of pain. But I think this works with emotional pain as well as physical pain. And I think with the cancer patients that I was alongside, it was both. holding on to both emotional pain and physical pain as well. And it's based on a Paul Gilbert exercise, and it's called Soften, Soothe, Allow. And again, some people may have already done it, but it does mean noticing. So as long as everyone's okay to just take a pause and do a bit of noticing together, then maybe we can all do that. Yeah, should we take a couple of minutes to do that?
Turn the chat off again, and we're all just trying to be present with this right now. Thank you, Sian.
Okay. So I want you to just make sure, if you can, that your feet are on the floor so that you can feel the ground beneath your feet. And just notice, I'm going to close my eyes while I'm doing this. You might find that that's useful for you as well. Notice where your body connects with where you're sitting. You might be lying. And just feel where your body is in this moment. Feel where your shoulders are. See if you can drop them a little bit. There might be a bit of stiffness in those shoulders or in your neck. And just take a breath in, just one soothing breath in. As you take a breath in, I want you to notice whether there is somewhere in your body where you might be holding a bit of tension or a bit of pain. It might be your stomach or your chest. It might be your neck or your throat. And it might be helpful in this time just to lay your hand on where it is. So you might put one hand on your stomach, perhaps another on your chest. And as you're doing that, just feel your breath coming into your body, and the way that your body expands is receiving the breath. You're breathing in. Your breath may have a color to it, or a warmth, or a softness. I'd like you to just direct that breath, that softness, that warmth, and that color to the place where you might be holding some tension, and see whether you can just soften the edges of that tension. Just smoothing it. We're not asking it to go away. We know it's there, we're acknowledging it and accepting it. But just see if you can soften the edges, right around the edges of a pancake. No need to go in, just notice it's there. And if you experience too much discomfort with this, just stay with your breath and notice your breath, and come back to your breath rising and falling. And as you soften, I want you to also see if you can soothe yourself as well in this moment when you're directing the warm, light, nourishing breath to those parts of you that might be holding something, might be holding onto something physically or emotionally. And just say to yourself some calming, soothing, kind words, maybe words that you would say to somebody who you could see was struggling. I can see you're holding the pain, so just soften it, smooth it, soothe it. Allow it to be there. You might notice thoughts coming into your head. You might be a little bit distracted, thinking about what you're doing next or what you've done before. Don't judge yourself for those thoughts. Just let them be. See them pass just as you would clouds in the sky or traffic passing, and direct your attention back towards the breath and towards the softening and the soothing and the allowing. And it might be helpful to say those words to you as you do this exercise. Soften, soothe, allow. Just do another couple of breaths as we come to an end. May I be kind to myself. May I notice when I'm in pain. May I be able to soothe myself in that pain. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and come back.
Sean, thank you so much for that. Yeah, really quite revolutionary approach. And a couple of things struck me. One is it's just so lovely to have over 2,000 people online going through that together at the same time from all around the world. That's really quite nice to feel that sense of. But also, I think you're doing something quite revolutionary here, which is encouraging us in a compassionate way to sort of turn towards our pain rather than away from it. And that feels very counterculturally. Actually, reminded me when I had chronic back pain in a very stressed job many years ago, that learning to sort of turn my attention to the pain and work out what was going on there was actually the transformational thing that helped me move on from it in the end. And I think often we think block and numb and just ignore. So that's really powerful. So that was soften, soothe, allow. Maybe there's a link to something along those lines we could share again with the audience tomorrow. What do you think?
Yes, yeah. And I slightly adapt it, and I did it because I like to be with you all, and it has been wonderful. It's been a real honor for me to be with 2,000 people doing this together as a community. So that was very moving for me. Thank you for allowing me to do that with you. Yes, I will send you the Paul Gilbert practice so that you can share with everybody else. And I would just say adapt it to what feels right for you. I like thinking that breath for me has a color. I like orange, as you can probably tell. So my color has a warmth to it. But yeah, you know, everybody is different and everybody experiences it in a different way. But I think we can. It's been lovely all being together in that moment, I think, of just acknowledging something difficult. And I'm a great believer in not trying to push things away, because it's that thing of what we resist persists. You know, if we try to push something away hard enough, it just fights back for space. So we just say, hi there, that's why I accept my self-critical voice. You know, hello again, here you are. Do we have room for self-compassion today? Come on in, you know. Why don't you all take a seat in my head?
On the subject of difficult things, we've got some amazing questions coming in, and I'd love to get to some of these because I'm conscious of time. And I'm not going to apologize for diving straight in with a really difficult one, because I suspect there are many people in this community and around the world dealing with similar things. Adam has simply said, my son died last year. So sorry to hear that, Adam. How best can I recover any resilience? Everything still feels utterly pointless.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry, Adam. That must be so hard for you to bring that here, actually, and to say that out loud to us. So thank you for that. I think resilience is not about, as I say, the trying to get back to something because life has changed. It's about how can you take your son with you in some form or another? How do you honor his presence in your life? And for me, that perhaps is something about loss and grieving, is that you can feel as though, and I haven't experienced anything like you've experienced, Adam, at all. The people I've lost have not been my children, and that must be extraordinarily hard. I know, though, that grief can sometimes feel like you're behind a glass screen and life is going on the other side. And it takes a time to feel like you can reconnect with the world. So I would say just take things very slowly. Bring your son with you. on your journey into your life where he's not there anymore, so that you honor and respect your life together and he feels like a presence. I'm sure you do that. But grief is a very individual thing, and different people will move through it at different stages. And even the sort of the Kubler-Ross, which I'm sure you know, and the stages of grief, you know, the denial and anger and all those sorts of people. Even Kubler-Ross didn't say that people go through it like this, because they don't. You may experience some of them, all of them, none of them. And it's about accepting where you are and doing what you can do in that moment. And I guess, you know, those small steps I was saying, which is for somebody, it might be reaching out for help, reaching out for the outstretched hands. It might be the going for the walk in nature. It might be reconnecting. It might be being with a friend. It might be, but all those things to do as well with your son in mind. And I hope that helps. And I'm not sure it does, Adam, but
no, but I mean,
I appreciate you bringing it.
There's no answer that can
No.
in these situations, but I'm really grateful for that reply, and I'm grateful, Adam, for you asking that difficult question, and also to Katie, who asked a similar question, and to others on the chat who've shared similar experiences, and of course all the love and compassion I'm seeing in people sharing in response. So thank you again as a community for responding like that. I'd like to take this a bit broader with a question that says from Alfie Ann Rowan. I'm not sure which of them is asking the question here. I'm a Macmillan nurse in Harrogate.
Oh, thank you.
Any tips for building resilience within the healthcare environment that I could do with my staff? Because obviously, as we all know and have been particularly woken up to in the last 12 months, the amount of commitment, compassion, whatever you want to call it, just dedication and hero-like behavior we see from people on the front line in the healthcare is just mind-blowing, and yet it almost feels ceaseless, and it feels to me like it must be utterly overwhelming. What are your thoughts on that, Sian?
Well, firstly, thank you for working for Macmillan. My mum was looked after in a Macmillan hospice and really benefited. She was a nurse herself, really benefited from Macmillan's care. I benefited from Macmillan's care when I was in hospital recovering from cancer. I worked with Maggie's, which is another sort of cancer charity. And I know the brilliant work that people do for those with cancer. There isn't enough psychological support. And being able to reach out for a Macmillan nurse or a Maggie's nurse or somebody who can help you with those psychological things is absolutely crucial. But yes, I really respect the fact that you are taking on a lot of other people's stuff and yet trying to do the best job you possibly can. And while I was working in the NHS last year, all the way through lockdown, I was asked to also give some help to intensive care nurses who were feeling a lot of burnout. And there's some very good work going on in the NHS at the moment about actually, and it's quite similar, I think, to Thrive, that model in a way, in that it is acknowledging that sometimes the point of crisis is not when you think the crisis is. Sometimes the point of crisis is when the crisis is over, because that is when you've stopped running and being on that sort of high alert, I've got to do. And then it's, woof, and you collapse, and then you've got to rebuild. And that, I think, is a time of real vulnerability. So in terms of what I would say to your staff, are similar things that were said to me, which is making sure they have a buddy system. So someone to talk to, like a mentor or someone who really understands what they've been going through, that they can talk to without judgment, who will be there sometimes to not talk about what they've been going through at all. Being able to share humor as a team. And I know that humor might sound like a really, really odd thing to talk about in a dark time or when people are coping. Humor is, I think it was Viktor Frankl, who was the psychiatrist in Auschwitz, who said humor is one of the soul's best weapons for survival. And, you know, he knew of what he spoke. I think finding those small pockets of joy together, making sure that there's no guilt about taking time off, making sure that there's no judgment, making sure there's no power I often think that sometimes when you're at work, in a work environment, and you have a senior position, you want to ask how people are, but you don't want them to feel like they're in a somehow weaker position to you, that you're bestowing these gifts of sort of compassion and warmth to them. And so I think sometimes it's about modeling vulnerability. We're all vulnerable at times. We can all be fragile. We all need to help each other wherever we are. I would be really conscious of power. What are the other things? Gosh, there are loads of other things. I think what was happening with the nurses I was speaking to is that they were working over shift, and they were so keen to do their very, very best that they possibly could, that they were really, really being hard on themselves on what they weren't able to do. So I think it's another thing is just do what you can do. Sometimes just your presence is enough. Just being there for someone is enough. You are enough. You know, don't burn yourself out, because it goes back to that Kristen Neff thing. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You need time to build, to repair before you can help others.
I'm so glad you mentioned Kristen, who's been another guest in this webinar series. Partly because I noticed someone in the chat was sharing a summit that's coming up with Kristen Neff on self-compassion, and in case anyone would like to follow that up. But not only was that a fabulously helpful answer to that question about that workplace environment, but it feels to me that's actually fabulous advice for all of us in terms of how we can support others, because a big thing that's going on right now is not just how do we deal with our own trauma and recover, but how do we help the people around us? That's really at the heart of this.
It is, and I think it's really hard. Sorry, Mark. I think it's really hard to know how to help sometimes, and I think I found when I had cancer and I shut a lot of people out, so and nobody knew how to help. And actually, the people that really helped were often those that would send me a text or a message just saying, "I'm thinking of you. No need to respond." And so the way is to, I don't need to talk about how I'm feeling. I don't need to, because if somebody's nice to me, I will just fall apart. Don't be nice. Don't say anything nice. I might collapse right here in front of you, right here in this room. So it's very much, but having that no need to respond, but I'm thinking of you, meant that I felt like I had the power back, if that makes sense, to engage on my terms at my time. And I had another friend who gave me a gift of some beautiful, perky, pink knitted breasts that her nan had knitted for me because I had lost mine. And that might seem like a really inappropriate gift. I'd just come out of hospital having had a double mastectomy, and it was the perfect gift, because there has to be humor in stuff like that. We all go through terrible times, but we need to be there with a friend who says, I'm thinking of you, and I know this will make you laugh, and I know it might feel inappropriate, but here it is anyway. And it just made me think, yeah, you thought of me, thank you. Your nan thought of me, thank you.
It's such a brilliant and charming story, but actually such a wise piece of advice for those of us who I sometimes feel really clumsy in my attempts to help people, that I don't know what I have. I don't want to make them feel more awkward, but in fact what you're really saying, a friendly, warm, authentic way of reaching out and showing that you're thinking of them. It doesn't need to be complicated. It just you need to sort of be there.
No. And another thing is, you don't need to solve things for people. Sometimes it's not about, I've got the perfect answer, or I know somebody who's gone through this and here's what I think. It's just listening. It's just being there.
People don't want to be fixed, they want to be heard.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. Just want to, while we've still got a little bit of time left, one other rather different sort of type of trauma that again I think has been really present recently. Lorraine has said, my family moved north, my sister moved to China, how do I deal with loneliness? And I think there's a lot of us who'd be disconnected and isolated. It's a kind of different type of, what are your thoughts on loneliness?
I think isolation has been such a big one for so many people this year. And I hope you get to connect, even if it's not with close family and friends. I hope there is some connection that you can get, perhaps in your local community, maybe online in support groups. And I know that's not ideal, But I think the very fact that you are part today of a community of 2,000 people who are all in this chat coming up with brilliant coping strategies, brilliant ways of connecting and engaging and supporting one another. I hope you find some comfort in that. I think we just need to find connection where we can at the moment. And I think that's so hard when people are so far away. But there are ways of doing it, but it's just one step at a time. Again, sometimes it's just about, I was working with some clients who have agoraphobia, and just getting out of the door is hard. But sometimes the one step at a time approach can be put your hand on the door handle. That's your thing for the day. If that's as far as you've gone, that's fine. Open the door, stand on the doorstep. If that's all you've done, that's fine. Walk down the path. Have a goal in mind where you want to get to, but don't feel you need to go from 0 to 60 in a flash. You don't. You can take things slowly, make those connections slowly. And people love to be asked questions about themselves. So if it is going into your community and just asking about other people, about their lives and how they are and what they're doing, then that is a connection.
It's a fantastic tip, actually. As you say, it's just a really, really nice, natural way of connecting with someone, is just to ask them about them in a friendly way. But I want to sort of come back to and perhaps almost end on that phrase, one step at a time. Because I think so much you shared this evening, Sian, is none of these in their own necessarily transform a life, and we certainly can't recover from our trauma immediately. But actually, the combination of these steps and the insights and the consciously taking small steps forward really is changing in terms of recovery and progress. I love bouncing forward rather than bouncing back. I think that's incredibly powerful. So maybe we could end with a question to everyone here. It's been so lovely being with a community, feeling a real sense of connection to others this evening. Perhaps we could ask the audience to share what one step they would like to take, whether it's been the Thrive model you mentioned, that lovely 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, this idea of soften, soothe, allow, showing ourselves more compassion, all of these great tips. What's the question we should be asking ourselves, Sian?
I would say, if there is one thing, one small thing, it doesn't have to be big, one small thing that you can take from today, doesn't even have to be from this session, but you can take from today. It might be treasure every moment. It might be mindful, be grateful, be kind. What one thing would you take from today that you would like to take into tomorrow?
And I love the fact that lots of people are mentioning 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and Thrive, but also waking up in a good way, being present, acceptance, asking questions and being interested in others, trying to rebalance my 3 brain states, showing gratitude, breathing more. Thank you so much, folks. It's lovely to see these flying past, and
it's gorgeous. It really is.
It's a great credit to you that you've triggered all of these thoughts and positive steps for the audience this evening. We're unfortunately out of time. I wanted to say a big thank you, first of all, to the audience for all being here, and particularly to those who so generously made a small donation to Action for Happiness for being here. This allows us to put these events on to reach all these people, to reach the hundreds of thousands that we affect through our other work. So if you haven't had a chance to do that and you found this evening beneficial, then please do, if you feel able to, make a small donation towards our charity when we send the follow-up tomorrow. It all helps to make a difference and reach more people. But Sian, I wanted to just turn back to you and say, is there a final thought you'd like to leave us with this evening?
3 simple things for me would be mindful, be grateful, be kind. If you can do some of that during the day, then you'll be going to a good place. So be mindful, acknowledge and reflect on difficulty and accept. Be grateful for the small pockets of happiness that perhaps have happened, hopefully, during the year that you might take forward. And be kind. offering compassion to others, accepting compassion from others, and showing it to yourself.
Sian, we're all incredibly grateful to you for your time today. Thank you for everything you've said and shared, for all your honesty and wisdom, and keep up the inspiring work. It's been a real pleasure being with you tonight.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you as well to everybody who's been writing in the chat box and being with us and doing that. This has been one of the highlights of my year, has been doing this and doing that mindfulness exercise with 2,000 people. That has been astonishing. So thank you. That's what I'm going to take forward to tomorrow and beyond. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mark.